Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to be meeting you and to be talking about intuition through the beautiful word InnSæi, the Icelandic version of or definition of intuition. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's a great honor to be with you. I've been really excited about our conversation.
Me too. Intuition is one of my favorite topics, and I don't think it's talked about enough in many contexts. We were talking before we
Mm,
start recording, just, in terms of I worked in corporate America, you worked for the United Nations, so we were both in systems. And what I observed from working with I had three different bosses who happened to be men. They were all the founders of their organizations and they all hired me directly and I reported directly to them. And they all used intuition. And I remember noting that and how they spoke about one of the founders who started a law firm. Three people grew into the third largest law firm in Boston in like 30 years. He
wow.
would say to me, Michelle, I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my
Mm.
bones. And I would love your thoughts on sort of the applications of how intuition plays into our lives, both from like a corporate versus like a personal.
Yeah, lovely. This is a great introductory question. So first of all, intuition is an embodied intelligence, and it means that our whole body and the brain are picking up, sensory data, information, like millions of tiny data throughout every single day. Most of this information data that we are picking up with our senses and other abilities are unconscious to us. And a very small fraction of our consciousness is our conscious focused mind, the mind that is awake and we are looking at each other and we're having this conversation. So there's so much going on under the surface of our focused attention. And that is our unconsciousness, and that's the sea within that intuition taps into for us. And one of the things that I really find important to mention from the start is intuition is fundamental to our intelligence. It's not just one tiny fraction of it. And it's working for us all the time. It's influencing how we show up, how we take decisions, react, and navigate the world. But it is very much up to us to what extent it is unconscious to us.
It's
So
up
a
to
lot
us.
is up to us. So there is so much
Wow.
going on unconsciously. So we can never tap into 100% of our unconscious. That would make us mad.
Yes.
It works way faster than we could cope with our focused mind. But let's just put this out there from the start that intuition is at work. And the more we become aware of our intuition, the more that we become aligned with it and learn to hone and harness it, the better we are at working with it. So
Okay.
intuition is developed over time. So let's talk about that a little bit later. But you mentioned your three bosses, and you said one of them said, "I feel it in my bones, like this is right or wrong." I suppose that's what he was referring to. So again, to this fact that intuition is embodied, and I often get the question, you know, so you're talking about feminine intuition? Is intuition that's more feminine? Is it, more something more that women have? And I can't really answer the question if women are more in tune with their intuition. I'm very open to like if that's the case. But what we do know, according to research, is that we all have intuition. It's up to us to tune into it, hone it, and harness it. But what is very interesting for this conversation, and I'm still like, this is like I could endlessly dive into this, and that is that whether or not we speak openly about our intuition and harness it openly is very cultural. And that's where gender comes in. So there's a research by a psychologist and former head of the Max Planck Institute in Germany called Gerd Gigerenzer, and a team of researchers. They've done more than one research on this, which says that, men and women, people of different genders have intuition, but it's culturally more acceptable that women talk about it than men. So it's food for thought, right? And so, sort of building on your example, I've had so many wonderful conversations, obviously with human beings, but also men, and often senior men, who have said to me, at the start of my career, I would never talk about my intuition because I had to prove myself at work.
Mm.
I had to prove that I could do things that I could do, and I had to sort of establish my reputation. But then, when I had established my reputation and I earned well, that was important.
Mm.
I had authority over a considerable amount of money and resources. Then I was able to sit back a little bit and say, actually, I can feel it in my bones, or my intuition tells me. So it comes with confidence too. So it's like we're also breaking lots of glass ceilings when it comes to intuition.
I think this is really fascinating. Not the direction I was planning on going, but we'll circle back because I have so many questions for you. But let's dive into this a little bit deeper because what I find interesting, they say feminine intuition, but oftentimes you'll hear, oh, mother's intuition. And any mom out there who's listening has that gut sense, especially when it has to do with our children. But
Hmm.
oftentimes I find, especially when dealing with, let's say, a doctor or something, it is not counted as valid or important depending on who is receiving you saying something. I can just feel that something's not right and not being
Yeah.
believed. Whereas when a man says, I feel it in my bones, it's received differently. So maybe
Yeah.
they're not as comfortable saying it's their intuition, but I think sometimes it's received. But maybe it's like what you said, it's when they get to a more senior place, they're more willing to say it. And at that point, they're so successful that nobody's doubting it. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, but your point on mothers. So I think we should recognize that and honor that, because giving, like, going through the process of life grows inside you, and you give birth to this light. In Icelandic, the word for midwife is the mother of light.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I think it's one of the
Yes.
most beautiful words in Icelandic.
What's the word? Can you say what it is?
Ljósmóðir.
Beautiful.
And it's literally light mother, so the mother of light.
Beautiful.
And so when women give birth, they have this life inside of them, and they are so tuned into their bodies. Often, not always, we know this, but often they're very tuned into their bodies. And sometimes the first time when a woman becomes really attuned to her body is actually when she becomes pregnant, because the focus goes there. And I know doctors who have learned to listen to mothers, and they said it's the best way to go, because big mothers often know so well. When we have fathers that are very active in their parenting role, what they start doing is they begin to observe their children. Every move, they're in the same space as them more often doing nothing special, but they're in the same space. They observe how they wake up in the morning, how they have their meal, how they read, the things they do. They observe more, and then their intuition about them becomes better.
Yes.
So for them, it's equally possible, or it's also possible, but it has to do with observation, attention, and really looking in the different languages that intuition speaks to us.
Mm. What are so okay, let's define the Icelandic definition of InnSæi. What because I you write about three parts to it and I know they all have significance and it's so beautiful because it's much richer than how I have understood or how it's defined here in the United States of intuition.
Yeah, thank you. So the word intuition in Icelandic is innsæi. And if you look up the word in the dictionary, it's defined more or less as it is in English. So let's keep that, that's how that is.
Okay.
But after I had done so much research and practice and worked with lots of different people and conversed with different people around the world, I realized that we have different ways of defining intuition, depending on schools of thought and disciplines and sometimes cultures. And it brought me back to my mother tongue, Icelandic. And I saw the word kind of for the first time, and I just realized that um, there is so much wisdom in how the word is created. So I have to give this a little bit of context. Icelandic is a language that is still very close to Old Norse. So modern Icelanders can read Old Norse and understand most or all of it.
Mm.
This means that with every new invention or new word that's introduced into our language, we create a new Icelandic word around it. So we don't adopt, let's say, English words and give it like an Icelandic sound effect or
Yeah, yeah,
accent.
yes.
We
Yes.
actually look at what is the function of this thing that we are bringing into our language. How
Mm.
can we describe it in the Icelandic tongue? So, InnSæi, the word for intuition, is made up of two words, in and sæi. In means inside or into, and sæi means to see or the sea.
Mm.
So, as we were developing the documentary film about intuition years ago, we looked at the word and we explored it. Like I opened it up like a sculpture. That's how I thought about it. And we were all kind of on that team to do that. It was just a revelation for us. And we got all these philosophers and Icelandic language experts and people to think about this with us. And what we did in the film, what the film gave us, the research behind the film was to really open up that word to say it has a threefold meaning. InnSæi as the concept means the sea within, and that refers to our ever-flowing, ever-moving unconsciousness that is inside us, this magnificent world within us, which hosts imagination. It's the world beyond words. It's this ocean, this unconsciousness that's constantly making new connections. And then the sea within cannot be put into boxes or silos because then it ceases to flow.
Mm. Beautiful.
Already that metaphor tells us a lot about the logic and universe of intuition, right? And then secondly, InnSæi, the concept means to see within. So that has to do with introspection, self-awareness, metacognition. You need to be able to see inside yourself, to be able to hone and harness intuition. The better you know yourself, the better you're able to put yourself into other people's shoes. Self-awareness also helps you discern intuition from biases and fears and wishful thinking. And this is where all the science comes in, because it's important to discern what's what there.
Yes.
And then thirdly, InnSæi means to see from the inside out, which has to do with navigating the ocean of life or your profession, your domain from within. And that means that you have a strong inner compass. You are strongly aligned with your intuition as you navigate uncertainty, for example, as most of us are doing in the world today.
I love this so much. So how did this come into your life, this work? And because I know you worked for the United Nations, I know you made a pivot. So I'm curious, was this something that was a part of you that culturally maybe your mom or your parents talked about and you reclaimed, or something that it in and of itself you got connected to your insight and then kind of got back on path. So or onto
Yeah,
a new path. I don't think it's back on path. You got onto a new path
onto a new path. Yeah.
with
Yeah,
your
this is
work.
a beautifully framed question. Thank you. So I grew up in Iceland. I had lots of space around me. I would roam around in the lava fields close to home. I was relatively free to do the stuff I wanted to do and explore things in my neighborhood. I was given a lot of freedom. So I don't remember us ever having used the word intuition, but I guess I was activating it all the time if I look back as I'm now a 50-year-old woman. What happened to me that really shifted the center of gravity in me was that I was relatively young when I was giving amazing opportunities at work. I was leading one of the UN agencies after the war in Kosovo, UNIFEM, now called UN Women.
Mm.
And going to Kosovo was like walking into an open wound. And I had done a lot of studies and research and writing as a journalist as well about the conflict in the Balkans. And I came there very determined to give it all I got. Like I really wanted to be useful to the people who had suffered war
Mm.
and wanted to rebuild the countries and country and build bridges between divided groups. And so this was my very strong will and intention. At work, I would say, even looking back, I was relatively good in using my intuition and people skills, building trust and relationships and trust and stuff like that to understand what's important and what's not important. But personally, I really sucked at aligning with my intuition. And so I totally crossed my limitations there. I was pushing myself very hard. I was not honoring my own boundaries. I was not taking care of myself.
Mm.
So, towards the end of my stay in Kosovo, and I would wake up in the night with nightmares, just really believing that there were bugs crawling all over my body. And it was very kind of real when that
Mm.
happened. I also experienced this. It's just incredible still to think about it, Michelle. It's January 2002. I'm flying to Kazakhstan from Kosovo for work. I have to overnight at the airport hotel in Frankfurt. And I wake up in the middle of the night, close to the morning, feeling this incredible pain, and I start to bleed. I take some painkillers and I just go on with work. And it's only a few years later that I had this epiphany, realizing I had actually had a miscarriage.
Mm.
And I didn't even realize it at the time.
Yeah.
That's how much I lived in my head, disconnected from my body
Yeah.
and emotions. And so from there, I moved on to being offered a permanent position with the UN, which is a very rare thing.
Yeah.
I had planted that seed a while earlier because I took this 2 days examination. Um, and so I was offered this position starting in Geneva. And the idea is that you travel the world between continents and you serve the UN until you retire. And I loved that idea.
Of course.
So
Sounds
I started to,
amazing.
it sounds amazing, right? It's a dream
Yes.
come true.
Sure.
So I moved to Geneva. I start my work there. And gradually I just feel super disconnected. This time, not necessarily to myself and body, but really disconnected from people and the planet.
Mm.
I just walked into this heavy bureaucracy and hierarchy, and I felt very stifled and disconnected from people. And I just remember saying this to a friend, like, I feel like we've created systems around systems around systems
Yeah.
around systems around systems that we can that we can no longer see the big picture and how things interconnect. So I had gone through this disconnection personally and also like on a more systemic scale, really made me think about the world we live in. I then go through some really hard period in my personal life.
Mm.
I'm heartbroken, disillusioned, and all this packed in one in a short period of time. I think it was less than 4 years. I just hit a wall. I
Yeah.
crashed.
Yeah.
And my body crashed as well. So 3 slip discs in my spine. I couldn't tie my own shoelaces. And the doctor told me, be prepared. You might not ever be able to work ever full time again.
Oh,
That was a
wow.
shock to me. And what was also a shock to me was that I could feel my light dimming. And
Mm.
I would literally look in the mirror and think like, where is the sparkle in my eye? I can't see it anymore. There's this the is that I don't know if the listener relates, but if you do, then just take a moment to take that in because that's a big sign, which I think we don't often take
Yeah.
seriously enough.
Yeah.
So I go through this yeah, I don't know what to call it even. It's just a very difficult time. I've I go through this period of not being able to sleep properly. My body is ill.
Mm.
And I'm heartbroken, and one thing leads to another. I resigned from my permanent position with the UN, and I'm also possibly going through a divorce, which then didn't actually happen at the end at that time. but I remember in my kind of really dark hours, I had just recently become a mom, and I'm in Iceland for a while. I go down to the beach close to where I lived, and I just had this moment with myself. And this question came to me. So I'm not 30 at this time, just to say, like I'm in my late 20s when all of this happens.
Wow, so young.
So young. And I'm standing at the coast in Iceland, and this question comes to me, Hrund. How do you want to look back on your life when you're an old woman?
Oh God, you're going to make me cry. Do you realize that's the heart of why I do this podcast? That
Oh,
question.
really?
That's the heart of why I do this
Oh my
podcast.
goodness.
That question.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. That just made me emotional. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for
I
sharing that.
don't know. It is. That
Wow.
really just hit me.
I
Oh my
would love
gosh, to
to,
have that at that age though, because I don't think I had that awareness at that age. But please keep going. Sorry, I don't know
well,
why.
well, I would love to hear honestly your experience with this because it's a very powerful question.
Yes, it is.
And when you hear it, like when you really hear it,
But how did you hear it? I'm curious. Did you hear,
I
because was it
it just came to me.
like an
Yeah.
intuitive like
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't think anybody, I don't remember if anybody told me I should, like it just came to me.
yeah. I don't
And
know
that's
what's
what I
going on.
remember.
I swear, also perimenopause. Listen, I'm an empath anyway, but I swear going through perimenopause lately, I feel like I feel things so much more, which is
Yeah,
funny,
well,
but
it's a
some
good thing,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah, no, I'm not. That's right.
It's a good thing. We're
Yeah.
stepping into our whole strength and ability
Oh,
to hold empathy
everything.
and strength and all these
Yeah.
different things. So,
That's
and
beautiful. I like that. Yeah.
and also just it's actually just to reflect on that, having this conversation with you, we're speaking through a screen and it feels like we're in the same room.
It
So
does.
that's a beautiful skill you have.
Oh, thank you. And I hope the audience, I think the women who listen too, like they're with us, I think that's part of I always want them to feel that they're with us, like they're with their tea and they're in this moment. But I think it's also your storytelling ability and your way of just speaking so truthfully, because I think when you hear truth, not only are you connecting with intuition, you're connecting with soul,
Thank you.
and then you can
Thank you.
receive.
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful reflection. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that is what happened to me, and I realized in that moment that I wanted to resign from my dream job.
Wow. It's big.
And it's very big, and I do want to share in the spirit of our conversation and just the fact that I can remember to say it now is that when I was standing there on the coast, it's usually windy, it's never really peaceful, although it's beautiful.
That's funny.
I just felt this calm come all over me, and I felt it in my body, and it's a feeling I hadn't felt for so long. It became very visceral. And I just knew, and then I took this decision. I resigned from my permanent position, even if the UN invited me to stay on and do different things.
Wow.
There was no returning back. But I also want to share to the women listening that it was a very hard decision for financial reasons and security
Yeah.
reasons, but
Yeah.
also because I really believed, and I still do, in the
Yes.
ideals of the UN.
Yes. Yes.
So
You're a
it was not about
humanitarian at
that.
heart. You're a humanitarian
Yeah.
at heart. Yes.
Yeah. I believe I want to do stuff that's meaningful for other people and a wider context. So definitely. So really related to that.
Yes.
And I remember on my last day when I went back to Geneva and I collected my stuff and said goodbye to my colleagues and said goodbye to the UN. I was sitting in the press office in Palais des Nations, if any of the listeners have been there, and I had this imaginary conversation with Kofi Annan, the then Secretary General of the UN. And I said to myself, I promise to be true to the ideals of the UN,
Hmm.
but I promise myself that I will have the courage to follow through with the ideas that I think hold true purpose and meaning, no matter what discipline or sector they want to belong to or whatever form they want to take.
Yes.
So that's why I've had more than 20 titles in my life.
Yes, I
And
saw your bio.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah. But
Isn't that life though?
yeah.
That's
And what
part of it
I've
if you accept the invitation.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
There's a way for everything. And also just to say in the light of things that are happening in the world today, all over the world,
Yes.
there's a way for everything, and it's up to us to choose if it's constructive or deconstructive. And I think
Yeah.
that's also something that I try to build on and convey in my book, for example, is to say like intuition, insight with ethics or
Mm.
ethical or grounded
Yes.
in the innate understanding that you and I are interconnected,
Yes.
that we are interconnected with the living world around us. And when we are engaging with, exposing ourselves, conversing with the living world, whether it's humans, animals, the natural world, whatever it is,
Yes.
it turns on our lights, it illuminates us, it gives us energy, it helps us go into the flow. Medically, it can heal anxiety, stress, and even depression. So I could go on and on, but just to say this is the core of why I think that it's so important for us to really reconnect with this magnificent world within us that we are just neglecting in the speed and noise in the world around us.
Yeah. It's interesting because I just had a guest talk about nervous system regulation.
Yeah,
And a lot of what you're talking about is also aligned with that because there is a need to remember that we are not these brains walking around on top of a body, that there's an integration and that the invitation and the power and the beauty and the knowing is all within. It's not from without. That voice you heard came from within, even
yeah,
though in a way it felt like it came from, it's all
yes.
right.
Yes, exactly. And also on that note, when you mentioned the word co-regulation, so we co-regulate as a species. So I die if I don't have any living being to co-regulate with as a human being. We can die from loneliness. We get depressed from loneliness. It's a real thing. And so we need each other to co-regulate. And also the way we co-regulate matters. So when we talk about intuition, if I want to like foster a culture and environment for you to stay aligned with and learn to hone your intuition, then it makes a difference how I am myself co-regulated because you will pick that up. So if
Yes.
I am under constant, like if I feel constantly pressured, anxious, stressed, angry, I have an energy that throws things away,
Yeah.
attacks people in a very intangible way, but still
Yeah.
felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is contributing to blocking other people's intuition as well, not only my own.
Mm.
So, this idea that we, like neuroscientists talk about, we co-regulate as a species. We know that there are a lot of, like, anxiety has become an epidemic in the world, right? And also there's a
Yes.
lot of talk about that in the States, and Jonathan Haidt with his amazing work and
Yes.
the anxious generation. What if we are co-regulating anxiety?
Yes. I think we are, unfortunately, and
Yeah,
disconnecting it
yeah,
because people are grabbing their phones
yeah,
as a way to relax, or which actually isn't relaxing their nervous system.
exactly. It's so not relaxing it. And I think we need to process of when we, as humans, I think in history, when we introduce new ideas, especially that have to do with spirit and mind and
Mm,
behavior,
yes.
we tend to talk a lot about kids and teens.
Mm,
Of course, it totally matters, and we can have the most impact when we focus on them. But when it comes to our smartphones and screens and distraction, it doesn't affect us any less.
uh, it definitely doesn't. It definitely doesn't. I always feel depleted when I've done a little bit of what they call the doom scroll, right? And just being
Yeah,
on there and your thought,
yeah,
gosh, I'll never get that 20 minutes back. And I don't feel better having
exactly.
done it. Um,
Yes.
so take us back. So you're having that question. It obviously made a huge impact on you. You had a sense that there was more for you to express your intuition, which I feel is in line with our creativity and our true nature, right? Like if you look at children, they're just constantly exploring, and there's not, like you said, systems upon systems upon systems. That's like a constricting energy. And so you allowed
Yeah.
more of like possibility and expansion. That space is scary though.
Yeah.
So because there's uncertainty and the brain likes certainty. So how did you determine next steps? How did you find more clarity? What can you share? I'm just thinking of women who are in places of
Yeah.
transition in their lives right now.
So, and that's a great question. So, first of all, a lot of clarity and energy came with this knowing what to
Mm,
do next.
mm,
And the next thing was to resign. And after I decided that, that energy kept me up for a while, but not for, I mean, it was very shaky after a while because nobody said to me, Hrund, that's a great idea to resign from your dream job and not knowing
sure.
how to earn a living after that, you know.
Right.
Nobody said that. And people were surprised but I was very, I just knew that this was what I needed to do. And I could feel and sense the possibilities on the horizon.
Mm,
But what I did uh, for a period after that was actually to dive into creativity. So for a while, for a long while, like I don't know even how long, maybe 1.5, 2 year, or maybe a little bit longer, my main thinking was around creativity. And then I ended up focusing on intuition because that's the fundamental thing to intelligence and creativity. But so
yes.
creativity, so I dived into creative. I've always done creative stuff like painting, drawing, stuff like that. I've always been very imaginative. So I dived into that young part of me or old part of me to really connect with myself. And I started writing a lot. I wrote a novel, I wrote poems, short stories. I journaled a lot. That was really healing. We can talk about that a little bit more later. But in
Yes.
general, to say that creative work and artwork, I wrote the play, that was put on stage, and then it's called art. But it was all a process of being creative, expressing myself, expressing what I had gone through and how I understood the world that I lived in and other people through metaphors or stories or, setting scenes in your mind to create the texture of an atmosphere and stuff like that. That is very cathartic. So I am a big ambassador for creativity because it's a goal in itself.
Mm,
And if I could dream of a new education system, it would be creativity is one of the fundamental threads, and it has an end. It's an end in itself. It's not a means to an end. Do you see? Not in this sense. So it's like we sometimes say creativity is coming up with an idea that has value. And then I always say, so what's the value? If it's just monetary, that's not, you're shrinking creativity.
yes.
And just for anyone listening thinking, what does she mean by that? I want to say, next time you go into a store or a meeting, be very aware that you are participating in a creative process. There is no script to the scene that you're walking into. You did not receive a script before you went to the shop to buy a dress or food. You did not receive a script before you walked into that meeting. You are spinning the conversation. The more present you are, the more you are to be able to hone and harness all the intelligence that you have and knowledge and expertise and experience. If you're absent-minded, you're going to be less effective and you're going to be less nice to be around.
That's true. That's hilarious. That's actually so true. And I love the idea of creativity for the sake of creativity. So,
Mm,
how did you let go? Because it's hard. Like when I left corporate and I was a new mom, I'd consulted for a little bit. I remember kind of losing my sense of like, wait, where do I belong?
mm,
What's my identity? It's like
mm.
when I had that position, so I was head of marketing of a law firm, people found it interesting. I wanted to know more about it. And then, you go to a stay-at-home mom at one point, it's like crickets. Nobody really
Yeah,
wants to chat about that. Although
yeah,
that is the work of a lifetime. And the
yes,
most rewarding and the one that matters the most to me is,
yes.
being a mom. But
Mm.
how did you navigate? having a position at the United Nations, which is coveted, and
Yeah.
what that all meant in terms of who you are in the world, and then navigating, you know, obviously you were doing a lot of beautiful things with your creativity, but it sounds like you had let go of the need for it to have be like this a title. You let
Yeah, so this is a very important question, and I have to say that it's almost like I was in a parallel way of navigating. So one is I really distinctly remember these moments. I was doing ad hoc consultancy. I was, some for the UN abroad, but mostly working from home. Some of it was for like just random companies in Iceland, just photographing and doing ad, like PR work for them, or I would be writing pieces for the media in Iceland and stuff like that. So
mm,
I remember this moment when my former editor was receiving one of my articles, and he said to me, "How shall we title you?" And I
interesting.
said to him, "Can we just say Hrund? Like, why do we need a title?" So I was at some
You
level,
wanted
I was
just your
grow.
name. Is
Yeah,
that what you
just
said?
be, yeah, it's just
Just
me,
I'm
like
me.
skip
It's
the
me.
title. Yeah. And
Mm,
so on the one hand, I was kind of growing into that, like just really releasing myself of the career ladder, which is what is that? And then all these labels that we put on ourselves. But then on the other hand, I want to be very sincere and honest about the fact that I regularly went through the crisis of not finding not finding my experience of what I was doing matching the reality around me. So it's almost like you are showing up, you're doing stuff, and nobody really understands what you're doing. And
yeah.
because you don't have a title or a label, then people just like they just don't. It's almost like they don't receive it sometimes. Not everyone, of course, but I would say if I would have done if I would could have do things differently at this time, I would say to myself, like, be open to what you're going through. Don't isolate yourself in it. I found it very hard to find people that could advise me and support me and guide me because I had such an unconventional background.
Yeah.
And I had the background of somebody who is 40 or 50, to some extent. I've been given these amazing opportunities, and my friends in the late 20s, they were like, they couldn't remember if I worked in Kosovo or Bangladesh. I felt very, so that's an isolation to some extent. And I realized afterwards, like it would have helped me
Yes.
to be more just unafraid to be open and vulnerable around it and just really seek advice. But then something happened, and I did start to get into contact. People just kind of showed up, older, wiser people. And so I received mentorship and guidance from people. And one was a healer, who just helped me sleep again. She really helped me understand what intuition is and tune into it.
Mm,
And she would teach me the discipline to simply be instead of do. I needed
yes.
a lot of discipline for that because I was so conscientiously brought up in education and work just to do, deliver, work so many hours a day, you always have to deliver something tangible, stuff like that.
Yes.
And so for me, some of the biggest lessons from her had to do with, you need to sleep when you can over a certain period of time in order to restore your energy. You need to have energy to do this. Don't burn your candles on both ends again. Stuff like that. And just healing my soul and heart and body again. And
It's
then I had
beautiful.
physiotherapy and all these different things. But yeah, so that it was like bits and pieces of both real life people that helped me, but also my very curious mind that made me delve into books and writing and films and recordings of, shamans, spiritual leaders, medical, researches, and all these different things just to understand what I was feeling and going through. And that was very healing to me. That's how my mind really works.
It's beautiful. It's just beautiful, and it's going to be relatable because the women who listen, I mean, it's a very professionally oriented. It's women who are driven to produce. And you did, though, which is interesting. I mean, you mentioned you wrote was it a screenplay or a novel?
Yeah, it was a play, and it was a novel, a draft of a novel, and short stories and poems and ideas for an education that which I then turned into reality. And
Right,
yeah,
which you actually taught at a university level. I want to dive into some of the tools from the book, but I'm going to ask you something because I remember, I don't remember who it was, somebody saying that intuition is based in science in the sense that you have the knowing because you've had the experience. But my experience with intuition is having a knowing where I have had no experience. So it's like, I think again, it's like people wanting to embrace it only if they can understand it through the lens of science.
yes, but
Whereas
yes,
to me, that I don't need the scientific proof to know the value.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
I just love your thoughts on that because
yeah.
my
So
intuition has spoken so strongly at times of things that there was no previous experience, but it was so clear, you know?
yeah. So this is very interesting. So the when I write about intuition, I always base it on research,
Which I
practice,
loved, by the way. I'm not
personal.
saying it. It's so
Yeah, yeah,
deep
no,
and so
just
well
to
researched. Your book is incredible. Yes.
yeah, but just to kind of put the context around it. So it's science is one of the things that I base my work on in the book, but also practice, which means spiritualism, arts,
Yes.
uh, sports people, explorers, how people use intuition in all these different metaphors, pianists, musicians,
Yeah.
healers, neuroscientists, just very kind of 360 approach to intuition. But what I also write about in my book more than once is the world of intuition is reminding us to be a little bit humble and to remember that we don't know the answers to everything. We actually have very limited knowledge, whether it is about consciousness, intuition, or the brain. And I write about the ocean as a metaphor for unconsciousness. We know very little about unconsciousness, and we also know very little about the oceans, by the way,
I didn't know
like
it
5 to
created so much
20%.
of our oxygen. I didn't know that till I read it in your book. I thought it was from the trees.
Yes.
How did I not know
Yeah.
that? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And maybe, and this is just the food for thought. Maybe we didn't know that, and maybe we don't know that because we see the surface of the sea,
Mm,
but we don't see what's below the surface of the sea.
yeah.
So you see the tree, but you don't see what's below the surface of the tree.
Mm,
You see the person, but you don't see what's below the surface of the person. So below the surface of all of this is an interconnected system.
yes.
And it's as real as the light of day. But just because we can't see it with our eyes, we tend to just put it aside and just forget that it exists. And just because we can't explain it in details, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Yes.
So, and then if we go back to your point, which is so important, like, so when scientists and researchers talk about expertise, like domain expertise, that's about deep knowledge in a domain.
Mm,
But there is also something called strategic intuition, which is in the literature, which is
mm,
actually about unlearning what you know so that you can gain a good insight and intuition into something.
mm.
So sometimes your own knowledge is inhibiting you from seeing the possibilities out there. And then there are these personal experiences where you have had really good, solid intuitions about things
Yes.
and about circumstances that you did not have any background in.
Yes.
That's your ecosystem. You're an ecosystem in yourself.
But
So
also
you have
tapped into the collective. If that's the case, maybe it
exactly
is the
because
eternal wisdom because it's I'm tapped in.
yes, exactly. So you are co-regulating with the world around you, not just human beings, but life around you. Sunlight affects our bodies in different ways. When our bodies are affected in different ways,
Mm,
it does affect our nervous system. It does affect how the brain works. And like my friend and colleague, Dr. Rebecca Granger Ellis, whom I interview in the book, and I got to know after the interview in the book, um, she is very good at explaining this and talking about this, how we really, really are interconnected to everything that is of life. And it's just really important to bring our attention to that and seek that nourishment too. So it's like you're an antenna. Dr. Ian McGilchrist says, we are an ecosystem inside an ecosystem inside an ecosystem, which is even a bigger ecosystem. So it's just different ways of saying that everything is interconnected. And to be honest, like it's not really clear where I end and you begin.
Mm.
So when we started talking um, a few minutes ago, or a little over half an hour ago, um, our minds have shifted a little bit.
Yes.
The way we feel has changed a little bit. We
Yes.
have learned something new. We are co-creating as we have this conversation. So I want us to remember that,
Yeah.
the juice of life that comes with meeting people in real life, to be out in the real world. So for the listeners who are feeling drained and just apathy throughout the days, do one thing for yourself in the next coming days. Once a day, do something that means that you're interacting with living beings and the living world, whether it's walking in the forest or meeting actual people, or do that. It will change your energy if you've been doing none of it because you're stuck in front of the computer or the screen, or in the same environment.
Yeah. So many things I was thinking about as you were speaking, and I love this. So, my favorite kind of conversation is this going sort of deep. And so, to be clear, I love science and I so appreciate all the deep research and the understanding and curious minds who are using their creativity to then like read all the literature, study all the data, and then synthesize it so that we can learn and gain from that. And there are some things that are inexplicable, and no amount of
Exactly.
study, I think, is going to get us to the answers that we want in the way that our brains desire. Um, and we are all made of stardust too.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
right. So, when you talk about the ecosystems and the connectedness, and I'll have when the women need to read your book, but I love the whole part about the trees. And I had heard about this before, but you talked about it in the book how the mother tree will send nourishment to
Isn't
the
it beautiful?
it's beautiful. Well, it's maybe tell them quickly about that and then they can read more. But I think, what we're talking about is sort of aligned with we don't see those roots and how deep they run.
Yeah, exactly. There
Yeah.
is exactly, it's the ecosystem, it's the mycelium, it's the thing that created life on Earth, and the trees communicate through the roots and mycelia underground, and they will send messages like, this tree needs more nourishment now, it's having some trouble, and then the mother tree will send it that way. I mean, they don't speak, but I'm kind of
Well, maybe
creating a
they
theater
do.
around it.
Maybe they do.
We just exactly. So that's the thing, there is so much that we are learning today about natural ecosystems and trees and animals that we didn't know about, you know, 40, or we didn't speak openly about, or it wasn't mainstream knowledge 40 years ago. I was interviewed once when I think I was 23 or 4. And I was interviewed in the British Embassy in Iceland. I was applying for achieving scholarships to study in London for my master's.
Yes.
And the last question in the interview from a 4 people's panel, it was very serious. This was the most serious interview I had ever been to, and I was really nervous. And the last question they asked me was, Hrund, do you think shrimps have feelings? And I just like, oh my God, like I was going to study complex emergencies and development studies. Why are they asking me this? So I just say something like, I don't know. I've never asked a shrimp, you know. And so they're like, oh, laughed and no problem. And I remember walking out of the interview just laughing so hard and calling my mom and said, you wouldn't believe what they asked me. But then I got the scholarship. And so they hosted this ceremony at the British Embassy. And I asked this guy working at the embassy, I think his name was Martin. And I said, why did you ask me that question in the end? And then he said, well, you have a very strong energy, and you're obviously very idealistic. You want to make the world a better place. We just wanted to know if you were grounded in reality.
Oh, wow.
And then a few years pass, and Switzerland has stopped serving, lobsters alive and throwing them into boiling water because lobsters have feelings. So, so we are learning so fast in all different levels and sectors. And so back to humility. The best thing we can do now, also given artificial intelligence and the fact that our minds have become the biggest marketplace in the world,
Yes.
the best thing that we can do in the world today for our inner world and the world around us is to connect with life. And intuition sums it up for us.
Yes. I could not agree more. Before we wrap up, I do also love giving very actionable, practical things that women can take away. You talked about journaling before. I think journaling is such a beautiful exercise. You mentioned The Artist's Way in the book. It's a book that I was really into in my 30s, and then I stopped doing my morning pages, but it reminded me of the power. But I'll leave it to you. Of some of the ways if a woman's sort of like, I feel like my light is dimmed. I want
Yeah.
to get some of that light and energy, soul energy back. How can they use the work that you've done and what you talk about in the book to reclaim that?
So you talk about if women feel that their light is dimming. So I'm going to focus on that. My book is full of practical advices to help us align with and hone our intuition. But on that note, in terms of bringing our light more into our life, connect with the real world, be very disciplined about the time you spend on your screen. Like look at it as a discipline. Like like do it for you. Go outside, into the color green helps calm down, regulate our nervous system. So just know that. Go outside, smell the air, look around you, look for glimmers. You know, glimmers are opposites to triggers. So look for glimmers, things that bring you joy, you think are beautiful. Look for that if that is what you need in your life. But like you mentioned, I always recommend journaling. And journaling is a way for you if you feel like your mind and head is just swirling, if you feel like the world around you is just going into cycles like way too fast and you can't comprehend it, it's very likely that your mind feels that way too. Then try this for a week. Wake up in the morning and journal for 2 to 5 minutes, even if it's not more than that. And journal in a stream of consciousness where you're asking your journal to just keep the thoughts for you that you don't need to have in your mind because you want to clear up some space. So journaling in a stream of consciousness is about just allowing thoughts to flow on the piece of paper. Don't think about what you're writing, please. Don't organize it. Don't try to do it well. Just let it go down on a piece of paper. Don't judge it. If you don't know what to write, then write, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know why I'm doing this. Why am I doing, whatever it is. And then just continue and trust the process. And then your thoughts will be on the piece of paper more than you will ever imagine. Do this repeatedly. If you can't do it every morning, then do it in the evening. If you can't always do it on the same day, then do it whenever you can. And start with that. And what you are doing as a first step is to become more aware of all the thoughts that are filling your mind. They are thousands per day. We are mostly unaware of them, but they are shaping how we show up and experience ourselves. And because you mentioned if the light is dimming, then add journaling about the glimmers. And what is my ritual and my practice, and it has been since I was very young. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. I feel like I'm part of a bigger universe, is to practice gratitude. And that can be a ritual for people, like it is for me. And it's super helpful to keep me grounded and to keep me on track with myself and the world around me and the things I want to focus on. So I think I'll leave those three things at that. I mean, there are many more, but then, the things like meditation, mindfulness, paying attention to what you pay attention to and document it in your journal. These are all very powerful things to create balance uh, against the running around, the overwhelm, the stress, the doing, doing, doing. Do more of being.
Do more of being. I love that so much. And I've loved sitting with you today. The words that come up when I just sit with you, deep, intelligent, beautiful, and grounding, which is your book. Which is your
Thank
book.
you.
Like how I feel just meeting you is like I told you before we started recording that I felt so at peace reading your book. And ladies, it's called InnSæi, Heal, Revive, and Reset with the Icelandic Art of Intuition. I'll have a link to your book in the show notes, but if people want to follow you, where do I send them to learn more about you and the work you're doing in the world?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have a website, which is my full name.com. I'm not sure if it's gonna deliver if I say it, but hrundgunnsteinsdóttir.com.
And it'll be
Uh,
on their podcast player. So
yeah,
easy.
exactly,
So
in
they
the
can just
notes,
link. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then I
Yes.
have an Instagram account with my full name as well, and I'm also on LinkedIn. Um, and these are my main channels, I would say.
I could do like two more parts with you. I'm so intrigued by the work you're doing, and I'm so
Thank you, and
grateful you've written this
likewise.
book. It's been such a beautiful conversation, and we didn't dive as much specifically into the tools, but that's what I want the women to do is go pick up the book and they can do the exercises that you shared. But I think what we talked about today, the heart of what this is so important and critical in a conversation I love having and that I don't always get to. So thank you for being
Well, thank you
here
so
and
much.
sharing your
Yeah.
beautiful work and heart today.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise. It's been a real pleasure and wonderful to speak with you. And as I said before, it feels like we're in the same room.
Yes.
And I also want to share that for those interested, I will also be offering hybrid online courses
Oh,
where
cool.
you can really learn to align with and hone your intuition through the lens of insight.
Beautiful. Okay. And so that'll be on your website, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And
good.
my social media, I'll be advertising it there as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you. This has been such a pleasure. I'm so honored to have connected with you today.
Likewise, and thank you for the work you are doing. And I see your book behind you, and I'm
Oh,
I'm going to get a copy of it
I'll
and
send
and,
you a
and read it
copy.
myself.
I will
Oh,
send
thank
it
you
to you.
so
I'll
much.
send
Yeah.
it.
Thank
It'll
you.
be my honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.